Hi everyone, it's the Susquehannock, and this is our newsletter slash podcast slash us randomly talking about stuff. Um, I'm Laura. I am the XO of the Susquehannock. We've got Joe, who is our second officer, Carl, who is our charities officer, and Jordan, who is our medical officer. And we have a few things for you. So, who wants to start?
Are we going to do the events first? Or?
Yeah, we'll talk about the upcoming events. I guess the most immediate upcoming event we have is we're supposed to go down to the Smithsonian, Washington, or not Washington, Virginia facility where they have two hangars with lots of different aircraft, including the Discovery Shuttle, a Blackbird, and much more. And that
The
Yeah,
is
Hazy Center.
yeah,
yes, it's just
yeah,
just make sure when you don't do this Smithsonian Washington because that's a totally separate facility. This is actually in Virginia.
yeah.
So
It's called the
information's on the on
Hazy
our
Center.
Facebook. I guess that's what's May 16th. It's a Saturday. So we're supposed to meet there at the place at around 11. Certainly reach out if you want to try to carpool with anybody. We'll try to work things out if we can.
It's a really nice facility. I was down, I don't know, like maybe, God, it's probably been 9 or 10 years ago now, but there's also there's all the planes to look at. It's at Dulles Airport. Um, it's which those planes are kind of fun to watch too. But they um they have things like the Enola Gay, and they have some of the first airplanes that like the first ones that carried passengers and stuff. But they also have some they have a IMAX theater, and they also have some simulators and stuff. Um so we hope you'll come down.
Yeah.
And then the only other upcoming major event we have come up is our annual picnic,
Oh
which
yeah.
is on June 6th. Again, a Saturday. The information's up on the web on our Facebook and on our website. Starts at about 11 or so in the morning and runs till whenever because we have the facility rented for the whole day.
Can you
Yeah,
describe the facility?
It's in
in
remember the
Manchester,
name of the
right?
park. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, the exact address, information, all that. If you check on our Facebook, it it gives you precise directions. There's even on the web page, there's some aerial photos showing you exactly where it's at, where the pavilion is relative to parking lot, things like that. So
Yeah,
it should
we
be.
always have a really good time with the picnic. It's a very casual thing, so if you've been thinking about coming out, it's a nice way to come in and be able to chat and get to know people and have good food.
Hmm.
Good
Yep.
food, good fun,
And
It's
it's
and the
open
fun
for
brings,
guests too, when
yes, you
people
don't have to.
are.
You can bring whoever you want to bring. I mean, if they're not members of the club or they're just friends or whatever, the more the merrier. We're not going to cut anybody off at the door.
Again, we did say we're going to put a list up of things we need. So it's not
Yeah,
too
so
much that people that
yeah, immediately there's going to be some more information coming out real soon here. We'll probably put up a list of things we're asking people to bring and kind of assign, sign up on the list. I'll bring this, I'll bring that. The other thing is we're asking for a $5 donation towards the rent of the pavilion. And then whatever money we end up with, over that amount, we'll just simply put in our charity fund or any other expenses we have for the day.
Yeah, yeah,
and it's
definitely.
also potluck. So remember to bring
Well,
something.
it's not quite potluck. We're trying to get a little narrowed down to at least cover the basic items. And that's why I said about a list. Trying to pick something on the list if you can, you know.
Right.
Right. Buddy
And
said.
well, yeah. And if there's if there's something else then you also want to bring, that's fine. Sometimes we have people who, you know, surprise us with with other
Yeah.
things too. And also, I mean, that's fine, like I said, it's casual, but we do want to make sure we just don't have like everybody bringing chips or something.
Yeah, or 50 pounds of potato salad,
Yeah.
Right. Right. And again, if you're a side item person, potato salad's good. But if it's three people, it's just like at least check. But you're welcome to bring anything. But if you want to check the list, what people did say they're going to bring, it could be useful.
We actually kind of did have that like in the past when we first started, where like everybody was kind of bringing the same sort of thing. So,
Hmm.
uh,
I think that's it as far as oh, and the other thing would be is, of course, July is shore leave. So,
yes.
mark that on your calendars. And, we won't have a table there per se for Susquehannock itself, but we'll be again supporting the Region 7 table at times, to help them because we are technically the closest chapter to shore leave right now. So it's in
Yeah,
our best interest to help them promote us and promote Starfleet.
yeah, and that is in Lancaster. And their big Star Trek guest is going to be Walter Koenig. There's also some people, including Gina Yashir, which I liked her from another show she did. Um, People from Starfleet Academy. Um, so there's a lot to see, and it's also a good place that, because we're all there kind of casually. It's a nice place to, meet us, and also if you're going to be over there, let us know. Yeah, so that's most things that are coming up. We'd love for you to come out. Um, and oftentimes we also have things like, kind of, we decide to go to a movie or something like that, and we'll put that on our site, and anyone's welcome to come.
Yeah, we
Right.
are looking to also see the new Star Wars movie together, The
Of
Mandalorian.
course.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
yeah. So if anyone in comments or on our Facebook, we take suggestions for things to do.
Yeah. Yeah. If something's coming up, or, something you're interested in, let us know. All righty. Well,
Mm,
we got the announcements done. Who's
Let's
next?
move on to events, like past events we just had.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell us about, uh, free, free comic book day you guys were out, and, you know, what, what comic book shops did you hit, or other shops and stuff, you, anything interesting?
Well, it's always interesting how people do it differently. Now, remember, there was this big company that's basically bankrupt now and resold to sell trinkets called Diamond Distribution, not too far from me and the Susquehannock down in Timonia, Maryland, that distributed almost all comic books to comic book shops. And they started this free comic book day thing like 20 years ago. And some years ago, a big publisher decided they were sick of them and they left. And then it went downhill and downhill. So Free Comic Book Day has been bought by an individual that he goes directly to comic book publishing companies. And then there's also another company called Comics Giveaway Day. And so now this has changed over to two companies doing the same thing every day, the first Saturday in May.
So
So,
how was this
so we,
free comic
what,
book day? How was
what?
this free? How was this free comic book day?
it was a great outing for us. We went to Comics Closet first down in Shrewsbury at the bottom here of York County. Greg, the owner there, was as nice as usual. No limit to what you could take for free. When we left, we put some people started coming in. They had a guy dealing basically downstairs in that basement we used to be in, dealing in baseball cards and things like that, sports memorabilia. And then we went up to Comic Store West, that Brian Wallersdorf owns actually in East York. And they have this big antechamber where they have a bridge club in during the week. Like it's a second store aside of the store with a big door between them. And then they do gaming at night, and once in a while like a flea market or something for like a little Comic Con for fans. Well, here they had so many free comics. They had about 100 different comics from Free Comic Book Day and a Comic Giveaway Day. You're
Wow.
supposed to take one for free, and then for every other one, you're supposed to give a 50-cent donation for the local library and some other charities. So
That's
we
not
did that. I talked a few minutes to Brian. They had some sales. There were a lot of people there, one or two cosplays. There was a Harley Quinn or Supergirl there, stuff like that. Then a few of us went to because our new member Scott and his daughter joined us there, and then we went out to Mexitali, which is a really good local brewery, and they have Mexican and Italian food. And then we went up to Dimension X Comics up near Harrisburg. What town was that again, Jordan?
I Spire.
In High Spire. You want to say a few words about how that went?
Yeah, I actually had seen this store before in a couple of different locations around my area, so they've moved around quite a bit. So it seems like they settled into these new digs pretty well. It's not just comics, but a lot of collectible art too. So
nice.
yeah, they had a relatively good selection to choose from, and they were friendly there. So,
They had
well,
a lot of pop vinyls and figures.
hmm
And then well, they had a lot of comic books though too till the end. If you go actually to the second floor, they had, a lot of the new comics at the side and the back issues in the middle. It was a little narrow. And then they actually had arrows. You had to go through the whole store up to that second floor through all these rooms to get your free comics. So they had good marketing that way.
Yeah, make sure that you look at everything else as you're going for your free comics.
Right. Yeah.
Nice.
Hmm.
Oh, yeah. And Jordan, you said when you guys went to Elizabethtown that that was kind of interesting.
yeah. Our friend Jeffrey told us about this area around this intersection there in the town square that had had a comic book store that wasn't open that day, but there was also this toy emporium that sold vintage toys from like way back in the 80s and such.
Wow.
They had quite an impressive selection, so well, a lot of pop culture stuff there.
And he did have Star Trek stuff.
That's always nice.
Yeah.
That's always nice.
And Star Wars and just about every American franchise you could think of.
Yeah,
Wow.
again, it's like you said, there was a neat bookstore there. There was a curio shop beside of the bookstore that closed early, but it looks like they have interesting things. I'd like to see it. And like they had stuff in the window and everything. And then there was a candy shop. And then we went out for a nice meal afterwards at a nice sit down place. So again, at a time we had 8 people, so it was a decent turnout.
Nice. Nice. That's um you guys talking about or Jordan talking about the games and stuff on on New Year's there's a candy shop that opened up on the square in York,
Hmm.
and it's got a lot of some of the old time candies and things like that, but it also they sell games and other kinds of things, and like we walk through there and I'm like, oh, I remember that game, I remember that one, so
Here's a bit of trivia for you. You
yes.
remember a line of toys from the 80s called Food Fighters?
Hmm.
There are some toy soldiers in the shape of pieces of food.
Oh,
Hmm.
Yeah, this toy emporium had some of those.
wow.
Yeah, that was a nice place. And there was supposed to be a comic book shop across from there. So you're going to go for free comic book day, and it's temporarily closed. They're actually taking it over. But it's a nice downtown area, even nicer than I remember from when I used to get there. So, it's a nice that this gentrification and bringing back downtowns is actually a thing.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So
Yeah.
many towns are trying to do that, and it really it's really nice because sometimes it's nice to just go down and explore, you don't necessarily have to have a specific destination. And sometimes you find some pearls where you're like, "Ooh." Yeah.
Yeah, we could probably make a whole day of exploring Elizabethtown.
Right. It requires some walking. That's the only thing,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
I'm always up for, almost always. But some people,
Well,
like that better and more able. But it is nice that. But even if some people would join us, like a nice place they went out to eat at, they can do that too.
nice. All righty, Joe. What do we have next on the agenda?
Well, Mr. Carl has a book review he'd like to do.
Ah,
Okay,
nice.
yeah. So again, last time I did Doctor Sleep. I mean, no, I didn't do Doctor Sleep. I did King Sorrow by actually Stephen King's son, Joe Hill, which was more horror fantasy. And I'll have to actually break in and actually do a science fiction review sometime. But this one is it's called The Auctioneer by Joan Sampson. And is anyone in here, we don't want to give everything away, familiar with The Lottery by Shirley Jackson,
Oh
which
Yes.
was
yeah.
published in 1948. So,
Yes.
and also there is Stephen King who praises this book. He wrote Needful Things, basically based on this book, The Auctioneer by Joan Sampson. Now, if you're familiar with The Lottery by Shirley Jackson, it was published in the New Yorker in June 1948. And it tells about this horrible thing that happens in this small town every June when people get together. And it's one of the last things ever. Back in the 1800s, a lot of people would read fiction stories in magazines that had all types of articles and think they were real. Edgar Allan Poe did a few of those. And this was actually in 1948. And she published a story, and people used to say, okay, where does this actually happen? Like they thought this was a transcript of a real event, which it was not.
Yeah.
So again, this was written in 1975, came out in 1976. It was actually almost a phenomena. It sold really well. They were going to make a movie of the auctioneer and everything. And then the author died really young. And they thought, oh, we won't be able to get anything else from her. And they scrapped the whole thing. And the book went out of print and it became really rare and really expensive if you found an old copy because it had that cult following. Now, about 20-ish years ago, this guy called Grady Hendrix wrote this book about horror fiction called Paperbacks from Hell. And basically, and he has all these, like, it's a full color book and has all these different, so in the 1970s, paperback horror got really popular. So throughout, like, here's one I have called The Succubus from 1979. So they had these lurid covers, a seductive woman on the cover, these big blurbs for it. And apparently, the guy who wrote this book, Paperbacks from Hell, he was at a hotel or something and he was looking for something to read. So he found an old horror book from the 1980s. And it was so zany, he was hooked. So that became popular in the 1970s and through the 1980s. And like lower price horror, like paperbacks, kind of died out a lot in the 1990s. Stephen King and them were still writing their books. So he devoured all of these he could, saying, the one thing is don't be boring. So are any of you guys familiar with what folk horror is?
I'm not.
Sort
Well,
of.
basically, folk horror takes place usually out in the country, in a small town or very rural area, where if you go there, there's something horrible happening the whole time.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like they have this deep, dark secret. So at one point in Shirley Jackson's short story, The Lottery, they say lottery in June, crops are heavy soon. So, are they doing something pagan to sacrifice for good crops, or is this just saying something that it happens this time of year right before the crops? Get what I'm saying?
Right.
So basically, even some of the old movies like Christopher Lee was in, The Wicker Man, was considered some of the beginning of folk horror, but obviously some horror stories, even they became popular in the 1800s and stuff, took place in the country. So it's basically, that if you're not in this inner sanctum, you don't know what's going on.
Right. Right.
So this book actually could almost be considered true literature. Like compared to all the zany 70s and 80s horror he has in this Paperbacks from Hell book, this is something that is more psychological. It has no supernaturalism at all, but it's about a town being taken over by this horrible person that says he's going to help them. Now, when Stephen King based Needful Things on it, he made this actually supernatural. That, and here's one spoiler: in Needful Things, it's actually the devil that sets up shop in town and entices these people. Okay, in The Auctioneer, and I'll read the back here. Do buy this book. There is no way to stop reading it once you've started, from the Baltimore Sun.
Mm.
Harrowing tensions explode in a series of events that could happen anywhere to anyone, just as they do to John Moore, whose days of freedom run out, who is stripped of his possessions, his courage, and his hopes by the ominous presence of a stranger impossible to resist. We are caught up in the perfect claustrophobic terror of Joan Sampson's fictional spell. I was hooked by her story, held by it, and purged by it. That was from the Seattle Post-Intelligencer. The Denver Post called this book utterly shattering. The Pittsburgh Press called it horrifying, and the Milwaukee Journal called it enthralling. Now, this is actually, see, it says Paperbacks from Hell there. This is a new print of the book that only costs $18. So from the big book, some of the better books that he reviewed in here, they put them out, the ones that aren't in easy production. So
Okay.
basically, it tells the story taking place in 1975 of this rural family in a fictional town called Harlow, New Hampshire, where John and Mim are the mother and father of a 4-year-old little girl called Hildy, and John's old mother, who walks in two canes, Ma, is also with them. And for 1975, they live kind of rustic. They love their land. They love their playful little girl. At one point, they want to go see one of these auctions, and it actually talks about them going down to wash up at the pond, taking the soap out. So, compared to some people, they do have TV and stuff. I'm talking about getting an indoor bathroom. They're a little poor, but have a lot of land. So, in the beginning of the book, John is burning some stuff out on the farm, that they own, some stuff they're getting rid of. And Gore, his last name, is the one sheriff they have who doesn't even dress like a cop, comes out and says, we had a murder recently a couple years ago in a boarding house here, and there are one or two home invasions, which we're not used to out here. I found this man called Pearlie Dunsmore, who's an auctioneer. We're going to start having auctions to raise money to get some deputies so we can take care of these changing times. Now, in the mid 70s is when all these people were moving out and buying land in the country and buying houses. It was one of the biggest times in 20th century history where rural was growing more than the city. So it comes into place here. So this Pearlie Dunsmore, this auctioneer, he's very charismatic. And at first he convinced them, okay, just give him a few of the old wagon wheels in the barn. So they give him that to sell at the auction, and he sends them a check for $3, which is worth close to $20 today. And so Mim, the wife, decides, well, let's give more stuff, make some more money. And it ends up, this is what's called quiet horror. It ends up that this goes on and on. They insist in bigger and pricier things. And people who say, I don't have anything left anymore, either have an serious amount of events that they have to leave town, or they have serious accidents where they're either really maimed or killed. And it just keeps spiraling. Okay, so now this gentleman, he doesn't want to give anything anymore, but he's afraid for his old mother, his wife, and his 4-year-old daughter if he does not. And it spirals out of control that people lose their land. Some people that have children that can't afford them. This auctioneer actually has these where people from the city come out to adopt them and everything. So it's like almost they sold up their children. And it all comes into this crescendo that at one point they even take the potatoes they have in the basement when they're out of stuff, this family, John's family, and they even wonder what, they're taking cows and everything. And it just gets to, it's like very well crafted. Like at first they're getting rid of things for a few dollars till, well, we need these police till it gets completely out of hand and this auctioneer is taking over town. And these so-called deputies that are hired, he pays them good too, and it's really destroying the life and even the lives of some people around there. So it's a really interesting premise, and I'd say about 70-80% of it could actually happen.
Wow.
That makes it even more terrifying.
Right. So where does it get to the point that, that someone would actually be able to say no? At one point, John says no, and the wife is so afraid of this guy, and he pretends all friendly. I'm going to go see Ma, and then she gives him her, and so John goes out to the barn, and she's so afraid she goes in and gives him like this changing table she has, a really old 1800s changing table in the farmhouse. And he said, well, that's fine. So it gets to the point that, they're pitted against each other, everything like that. So it goes from wanting to help people out to this is getting a little much to complete fear to complete devastation.
I think stories often where where there is no supernatural, but there's that psychological thing can almost be scarier because there's that little kernel where you go, that could happen.
Well, it's interesting to read this because it's very well written. Like the way they describe the pond at the house, their farm and the area is almost a character itself, which is getting sort of like these yuppies coming and buying, and hippie types coming and taking buying these places to make them more commercial and everything. So the way it just spirals, you actually do think in the end, where does this leave reality, and that this actually wouldn't happen, or does it?
Right, right.
So it's interesting, and the climax is interesting, and it's kind of like almost what they call soft horror. Like you hear in retro, like through the grapevine, oh, Joe Schmo did not give anything last week. His barn completely burned down, and he had to move. Or this person had an accident where one of the kids drowned in the well. Or this person was accidentally shot from maybe some hunter, which you think is probably the deputies that Pearlie Dunsmore, this charismatic, you know, uh, auctioneer hired off. So it just gets to the point where, how can I say no? Because is my family going to be in big trouble? Do we need to even leave here? And are we giving up everything, this whole land that we had for generations?
Yeah, yeah. And you can also uh you can also see uh you know like where where there has been time in human history where you had, a similar situation or a place where people had to make, decisions like that and stuff. So, yeah, those types of books I've always kind of enjoyed. Um, so I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, my oldest sister Sharon says she might even want to read this, but you can certainly read mine. So again it says here paperbacks from hell. So they redistributed some of the books that he wrote about in this nonfiction book for easier access. But it is really interesting. I mean, it's a slower burn,
All
but
right.
just the way it gets into the mentality of everything there. Like, for example, at one point, he comes around, Pearlie Dunsmore, this charismatic auctioneer comes around as a good guy, and he wants a 4-year-old to go to his Sunday school. He's going to really make this small community better. And then they scare her for a thing by telling Isaac, sacrifice Abraham, sacrifice Isaac to me. Like they get into this really big story about how this guy almost kills his kid and everything, and they're trying to put this fear in people from day number one, but saying, "Oh, we're trying to do these good things." That's an actual Bible story. See what I mean?
Right. Right.
Is
Very
Paperbacks from Hell worth reading too?
It is. Now, some of the stuff we had many conversations of, like he calls Amityville Horror, the Amityville Horror series, A New Thing in Stupidity, which, a lot of them aren't good books. To me, the first book, the Amityville Horror, the way they claimed it to be true, and some stuff was true, and the author was never even there, and everything. Like, I think that's an interesting case study. whether or not the other ones that claim to be true are any good, is a different caliber. So I don't agree with everything in it. But that was a big part of me growing up. I was always into scary things. In around the mid 80s, when I started taking my bike down to town myself, there's this place called the Newsstand. It was an old-fashioned little store where they had, coffee and donuts and stuff, and they had all these paperbacks you could buy and newspapers and magazines. I'd buy my Starlog magazine there for science fiction and some comic books like Superman. And I used to buy a lot of horror novels. So, just the way, again, this man accidentally later on read a 1980s horror novel and he got hooked and decided to write. And he's written several of his own novels like Horror Store. You say you read that one as well. So again, this is compared to your zany 80s horror, 70s, 80s, because this was 1975, published in 76. This is a lot more serious. This could be up there with something like The Lottery or Sherwood Anderson's Winesburg, Ohio. That might be a little more literary than this, where it deconstruct small town life, stuff like that.
Very good.
Cool.
That definitely sounds interesting.
Like mine here, for example, the grandmother, the protagonist John's mother, who walks with two canes, they go to buy chicks once in town. And she's like, why aren't we raising our own chicks by mating chickens and roosters? Well, this is easier. So it starts out, how all these things are changing as the 20th century progresses. So at one point, like when he's still trying to be their friends, the auctioneer comes over and he has this old couch. And he says, I think she has two canes. This is a higher couch. She can sit in this easier. So they exchange this really decrepit couch and she's still enamored with him, for now. She learns later. And she says, you're right, I can sit in this easier. So they take the other couch that his wife, Mim, had put all this patchwork stuff together, with old rags and clothes and everything, which were being a higher price at the auction. Get what I'm saying? That these yuppies can buy this hand-spun thing. So he's pretending he's doing them a favor, but he sells this thing, then what he leaves is worth less money because it's an old couch. And he, but it gets on taking people's land, punishing them if they don't give stuff, everything like that.
Cool. Yeah, that's interesting. All righty.
You said that's available in paperback or hardcover?
Paperback. Yeah, in other words, this new series, Paperbacks from Hell. And I think this is the only one this caliber. The other things are, these 80s, like almost Friday the 13th type of horror stuff. I mean, they don't have that, but get what I'm saying? Like there's this one, the first one you read, there's this old castle with these little gnome-like creatures that attack people underneath and everything. This one is a well-written book. It's too bad that she didn't live longer to publish more stuff. That her death was, a tragedy for someone who had a lot of potential. Joan Sampson. Again, they were going to make a movie, and when she died, they decided to scrap the whole thing.
Well, maybe someday.
Maybe someday.
Still would make a really, really good movie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All
Or even
right.
like a mini series or something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Yes. Okay. All right. So what do we have next?
Well, it looks like next we have Jordan's going to talk about his library.
Oh, yes. Tell us about that.
Yeah. I work at the Love Memorial Library in Harrisburg, and I do this science fiction and fantasy book discussion group once a month. I call it Otherworldly Book Group.
Nice.
And our most recent meeting was actually yesterday. So, fun coincidence. So,
you meet in person or online?
both.
Oh,
You
nice.
want to attend in person or through a Zoom link, you can.
Oh,
Well, tell us about some of the stuff you read and discussed.
Well, most recently in the last few months, well, you see, the way I run this group is that everyone doesn't have to read the same book each month because it might be hard for someone to get their hands on a particular title. So instead, everyone can choose their own title to read based around a certain theme or idea. So then we can discuss and compare the books at the meetings. And over the last few months, I've been doing a kind of a timeline approach with us finding stuff to read that were written throughout history, like first pre-20th century science fiction and fantasy, and then something from the pulp era, and then something from the 60s and 70s new wave movement. And then most recently we jumped ahead to the 21st century and read stuff from after the turn of the century.
I love
So
that. I like that approach to a book club. Doing, here's the theme,
yeah,
'cause that's nice because I feel like it gives people suggestions too,
yeah.
maybe they
And
think of reading a certain book.
it opens up discussion about people's reading preferences, and you might find something new that you want to try.
Nice.
So for me, for the most recent meeting, I read Caliban's War by James S.A. Corey.
Okay.
It's book two in the Expanse series, which was made into that television show from Amazon Prime.
I remember that. Yeah.
So, and actually, originally it was on the Sci-Fi Channel, and then Amazon picked it up after 3 seasons. So it seems to be part of what's commonly called the new space opera in 21st century science fiction. It's about kind of like the space adventures from back in the pulps, but with more rigorous scientific accuracy. Like in the setting of the Expanse, humanity is colonized in space, but hasn't expanded out and beyond the solar system. So then you have Earth and Mars are their own independent nations, as well as the asteroid belt settled by the Belters, who are considered second-class citizens.
Well, is this like a slower moving book then, or is it still pretty like are they a lot different people now on the different planets and stuff? Like types of society and everything?
Yeah, especially the Belters. Living in zero G or low G environments, their entire biology has altered. Like their bodies have become a bit elongated and fragile to the point where many of them can't tolerate being on a gravity of a planet anymore after a few generations.
Yeah, so it's a kind of a shorter, like a smaller scale in this solar system from Asimov's Foundation, where the aliens are different groups of people, and they're so far out they don't even necessarily remember they're from Earth originally.
Well, yeah, something like that. And uh and the plot of the series revolves around this group of people who are part of a asteroid mining crew on a ship, and once their ship was destroyed, they escape and obtain a Martian gunship and are forced to deal with the fact that factions in the Earth government and super corporations are experimenting with this alien proto-molecule that seem able to manipulate biological matter and recreate it however it sees fit.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the basic premise of the TV show too. So if you ever watch it, you'll get the basic idea of the series. And while the books and it's a 9 book series and they all are around top in around 600 pages or so, but even then they're very easily read.
Is the TV series the same name?
Yeah, well, the TV series is The Expanse. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Now, how would people get involved with your book club? Is there a place to sign up?
Yeah. If you go online to our website, that's dcls.org. You can look up events and find Otherworldly Good Book Group, and you can register for it. And we do request that you register for the group if you're coming instead of just showing up.
That's a fair enough rule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Nice.
I actually ended up reading 2 books for the book group this month. In addition to Caliban's War, I also read Elantris by Brandon Sanderson,
Okay.
just because he seems to be the most successful fantasy writer out there today, and I haven't read any of his stuff up to now. So he's be this book isn't as better known as some of his later works, like the Mistborn series and the Stormlight Archives, which is part of his big Cosmere setting. But the Elantris was his first ever published novel, and I thought it sounded interesting because it sounded like Atlantis. And like Atlantis, it's Elantris is this magical city where its citizens are all powerful and kind of rule over the local community in a benevolent way. But then the story starts out after the city has fallen, the magic has disappeared, and its inhabitants have become sickly and cursed, and now they've become an oppressed minority in the new regime. So there is a lot of themes in there involving po politics and religion and standard high fantasy stuff. But it's done in a unique new way, which I think typifies a lot of science fiction and fantasy literature in the 21st century. They're finding new ways to tell old stories with the same basic tropes. And I think that's interesting.
So many books, so little time.
Indeed.
I like them.
Right.
But working
Time
in a
enough at
library,
last.
working in a library gives you a good chance to catch up on your reading, especially if you're reading for work.
Hmm.
So,
True.
so
Yeah, I'm reading right now, and this isn't really anything for fandom. 13 Reasons Why. That novel about that girl teen suicide that records these audio cassette tapes for different people to listen to. And it's really interesting,
yeah,
that she thinks are involved in her deciding to commit suicide.
the library has something for everyone, whatever your reading preference might be.
But that's a Netflix series too. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So for the next meeting, the theme is to read a science fiction or fantasy book that has been adapted to film or television and see how the two compare. So I'm going to read the original Planet of the Apes novel.
Oh, okay.
And in point of fact, I have watched the original Planet of the Apes movie once, but not any of the sequels that came after it.
There was some years ago now. There was some channel that did like a marathon of the Planet of the Apes movies, and I had never seen it, the original or any of them. And so I watched it, and I was excuse me. I was very impressed with the first movie. Um, I think as it went, and I'm talking about the old movies, not the newer ones that,
Yeah.
Classic, yeah.
yeah, the classic. As it moved on, it maybe wasn't, the movies weren't quite as good, but um still very interesting. So um I'm not sure if I realized that there was a novel. So that's something I'm not sure I realized. So
Yeah.
maybe I'll pick that up sometime.
Yeah,
The novel was first, right?
what's that?
The novel came first, right?
Right. That was the seed that started the entire franchise.
Yeah, okay.
And it was actually written by a Frenchman.
Oh,
He wrote it in French originally or English?
Yeah, French. And it was translated.
Hmm.
Pierre Boilet, I believe his name was.
oh, well,
You
that's
Yeah,
didn't speak already, does.
I think in those old movies they did have something that even the CGI new ones did not. Just seeing those apes, the way they um,
Yeah, the
acted
makeup.
like humans, except there were some differences, the way they were made up and everything. It wasn't so much about can they still jump in trees. And it was, like I said, the first movie I think was really interesting. Like technically, for the longest time, you don't know that it's not another planet, things like that, till he sees the Statue of Liberty and how, it's apes with
Well,
human intelligence, with more or less 1800s technology.
Spoilers.
Right. Well, like no one doesn't know at this point.
Yeah, that's become so ingrained in our pop culture.
From
Probably
the
you know what that is if you haven't seen the movie.
Yeah, and to be
when you
honest with
spoil it
you,
for anyone.
the original movie posters, like right when it came out, did not show the Statue of Liberty. Now they always show that, when you
Yeah.
before you watch a movie that he's with that.
Yeah, that uh that's kind of the big reveal at the end.
Well, did you know it going in or not?
I had maybe seen like clips that showed that, but I didn't know how it fit in until I watched the whole movie. So,
Okay, so maybe I did do a spoiler then.
well, I mean, again, this was some years ago that I watched it. Um, so, oh, interesting. I'm sorry. It's not that this is boring. I just was I just had a longer than expected trip last night and I'm like still kind of a little tired today. Alrighty.
Well, I'll let you know what I think of the novel when next time we talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Nice. So what did we put next on the agenda, Joe?
I guess we can move into to an open discussion about something. Like you had a topic you wanted to, like last time we talked about Star Trek and Star Wars and the how it's kind of dimmed down and what's thinking about the reasoning.
Yeah, yeah, if it had kind of been oversaturated. But
Yeah.
today, and this kind of fits in, Carl mentioned the Wicker Man. Today, the thing I wanted to kind of ask you guys about is remakes. Um, you know, like them, don't like that they do them, feel like it's done too much. Um, I mean, with that particular movie, The Wicker Man, I really feel like the original was a little bit like creepier and a little bit more kind of claustrophobic, this feeling of, being in this, this kind of isolated place and stuff. But I'm wondering what you guys think of, when they reboot things on, with movies.
That seems to be the only thing that Hollywood does anymore, it seems like.
Well,
Everything become a sequel or a prequel or an interquel or just like you said, a reboot. The original ideas seem to be pretty hard to come by nowadays, or at least the movies that do the best anymore are franchise films and like that.
Well, it's like anything. There's the good, the bad, the ugly. There's some that are really good remakes, some that are and some that, are really bad. And well, good, bad, and ugly when you're doing something for entertainment, it is an opinion rather than a factual statement. But, for example, like if you're into horror like I am, are you into the black and white Frankenstein and Dracula or not? Are they too dated? So then like Christopher Lee's like Hammer's Frankenstein and Dracula holds up pretty well, I think. And then of course they just had, which I haven't watched yet, the Frankenstein last year that won all these Academy Awards. See if they make it more Victorian and everything. Some remakes are god awful though. Like if they just go for I mean, I think creative expression is 95 to 98% developmental in that once something's out there, it's been out there and you can use it even if you're not really enough to build upon it. But then is something being lost? I think the CGI created Battle or Planet of the Apes are not nearly as good as the originals.
Yeah.
but I think that also becomes an unfair opinion because I think the younger generation that's been brought up on this CGI, that's what their expectation is that
Right.
it was more the effect and the ooh and ahs, versus the dramatic point of the dramatism of the movie and the artistic was of the movie. You know, filming Planet of the Apes with using that makeup alone, I mean, was incredible. You know, in a sense, it was an achievement. You know.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Like not only, not only age differences, because you're right, people people today are used to the CGI and they have come to, expect that. But, I think it also depends on how you know, how much you're into, like the history and the way things are filmed and stuff like like you were saying, the when you realize that the special effects from back then were kind of incredible for the time, if you're kind of more into that, like, that history of cinema and stuff, you might appreciate that more than if you're not. I mean, one of the movies that I always kind of find amazing is that silent film, Metropolis,
Mm.
because for the silent film era, it was a big idea, and there was, some special effects that certainly these days we'd think are, like but it was amazing, that a film that was made in that time period would be, that well done. So,
Yeah.
So is it just a matter of like they were good for their time, or some of these classics better than stuff that they and hold up really well?
that's a
Well,
good.
I think it's also a change in the perspective and culture too. I mean, you look at Star Trek alone. I mean, certainly there's people that are diehard fans like some of us with the original series, but then some of the newer kinds kind of look back to, oh my, that looks like a cardboard set. It's like, how can they can't get past that to watch the stories behind it and the and what really started all Star Trek to begin with. Was that idealism back then. Not It wasn't about the cardboard set. It wasn't about the goofy looking, makeup on the aliens. It was just a matter of the story, the messages it was trying to sell at times.
Well,
And I
some
think that
practical effects though for stuff like intimate things like characters and stuff, makeup and everything, I think to this day can be more realistic than because you can tell when stuff's CGI. Like this is actual 3D for real stuff.
mm,
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean with when they do remakes or they do sequels, but specifically with remakes, I think there's a lot goes into what your expectation is, because if you want to see, a remake, do you want to see a remake that is kind of exactly like the original, but just maybe updated as far as the look of it? Or do you want to see something that is maybe done in a different way? Like when they did that remake of Psycho, they did it like frame for frame, you know, trying to do pretty much, the same thing. But, then you've got other movies where they've kind of changed things or sometimes made it creepier and stuff. Um, because I know, back in the day, sometimes um, you know, the, uh, the movies that, the censors would say, oh, that's too scary. you know like, whereas today you don't have as many limits.
One thing that's always puzzled me about the whole phenomena of movie remakes is that oftentimes the remake films that a lot of people feel like didn't really need to be remade because they were strong enough. The
I have to agree that that happens too often.
Even really old movies like say The Day the Earth Stood Still from 1951. I think the original was sent a pretty strong message, even given the time that it came out in. And then the remake with Keanu Reeves just kind of updated the special effects and everything, but changed the whole story around, so it wasn't even the same message that they were trying to send
Yeah.
before.
It's laziness, I think, so in Hollywood. In other words, you're taking an old idea and let me wash it around a little bit and make it now I'll claim it's my own.
Yeah, I'm sure that happens quite a bit.
Well,
But
I
then
think we can.
unless you saw the original one and you only saw the new one with Keanu Reeves, and that's what you're judging your view of the movie by.
That's true. That goes with
That's
with
why it's
TV shows
disappointing
too.
when the remake is feels inferior to the original, because a lot of newer audiences will might not end up seeing the original then if they only see the remake first.
Well, it comes down to a few concepts here. If I'm watching a really old movie and they sit around and talk a lot, when does that get boring? Or when does like the remake of King Kong or something where it's constant action and there's no substance to it, when is that too much? Get what I'm saying? You can have this happy medium. And again, creative expression is 95 to 98% developmental, that you can use something from the past that was good and adapt it for today. I mean, yes, maybe once in a while, like some of the classic rock I'm into and everything, the keyboard sounded different. Like once in a while, something's lost. Get what I'm saying? Like the keyboard for the Boston's original, all the 1970s rock I listened to, you can play it on a modern keyboard. It has a different feel from those, recorded albums. Some of my friends into bands and stuff when I was younger would say that too, that we found an old keyboard and they don't make them anymore that sound like that. So otherwise, a few things get lost once in a while, but remaking movies or anything creative endeavor, artistic things is developmental, and that you can go back to the past, keep what's good, change things, have new ideas yet. And sometimes they do a great job, but too often it's not such a great job. And that's, what frustrates me sometimes.
Well, let me ask you something. What is a good example of a remake that was actually better than the original?
Well,
That's a tough one.
that's a tough one. I mean, Salem's Lot from 1979. Some people really like that miniseries, did not thrill me. The book, it was a lot more like the book and the remake they made. Do you have an example?
Um, the only one I could think of is I remember seeing the original War of the Worlds, and then I saw the new one that was done by with what's his name in it? Tom Cruise.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought in some ways, because of the newer effects and some of the storyline was a little better than the original.
Then there's the John Carpenter's The Thing, which is based on The Thing from Another World from the 1950s. And
Mm-hmm.
that I think that movie was probably totally different than the movie, but they took it in an interesting enough direction that I think they pulled it off.
It was pretty good, yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is there a movie you can think of that was a remake that it was actually worth? Yeah, you're glad they remade it.
So like the original was pretty bad by comparison.
Not necessarily
Or at
bad,
least,
but that the remake felt worthy that they made it. In other words, you didn't like, okay, that was they did a good job at it, and I was
well,
happy with it.
Kong and Skull. I love the original King Kong, 76. We loved it because we were kids. The TV one, the one Kong on Skull Island where he was a predator to those little diet, everything. I thought that was really good.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Because sometimes not just the special effects, but the concepts may be, updated to something that, you know, would uh would resonate with, modern audiences better. So, um,
Another thing that one of my favorite movies from the 50s is uh, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Okay, the
mm,
79 version, and then even Body Snatchers that came out in the 90s, they took it in a different twist that I thought they were very well done films. with the same theme.
Yeah, because you did have a lot of films, um, in that time period, the 50s and stuff, that, dealt with like, fears that had to do with the Cold War that, later, when that was, you know, you know, ended, a modern audience might not appreciate the concept more. So if you update it to something that's more modern, um, it might be um better in that, it addresses something more modern that, the audience can relate to more.
Um, that's a good point. But then you start coming to those remakes of films from later in that era in the 20th century, like Total Recall. That was from the
Mhm.
80s, and then they remade it again in the 2010s, and
Yeah.
it's like almost not had almost nothing in common with the original.
Yeah.
And
And yeah.
it's
So just
sometimes fun.
remaking
Sometimes
it,
some movies.
just remaking it to make it more something to make it more viable to modern audiences. I'm just saying it doesn't always work.
No, no. And sometimes what was, oh, good God, the name is, um, there was a remake with Nicole Kidman. It was the story where all the women are like sort of these, you know,
The Stepford Wives.
yeah,
Separate wives, yeah.
yeah. The remake, I almost, at least at the time of the remake, I felt like the concept wasn't as, as viable, but they also threw in a little bit of comedic stuff
Right.
that I thought, wait a minute, it doesn't gel with the type of movie that it was supposed to be.
Well, the 75 Stepford Wives is a serious movie that
Yeah,
gets into how much do you want control over everything and how much do you want freedom
yeah, yeah,
and who wants what. The
yeah,
men want to control these. Well, you get what I'm saying.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
exactly, exactly. And um, and I just, like I said, I just thought, nah, this wasn't, this just didn't work for a remake.
And
So,
again, that was originally an Earl Lewin novel, the same person who wrote what's the Rosemary's Baby. So
okay,
they were all novels first in that case.
okay, okay. Well, so that we don't go on and on, I think we'll end things there. But if anybody has opinions on that, put them in the comments, or we can have a discussion on our Facebook group, um, because we'd like to hear your opinions too.
Hmm.
So, um, should we end with a joke or two?
Coming right up. Like,
Jordan is our king of sort of what you call the dad jokes.
well, this is a I am the chief medical officer, so that also makes me chief morale officer on our ship. So what better way to keep up morale than with some humor?
Yes.
So
So if we
because
don't like the joke, we can hold it on you.
yes, you can fire me and hire someone else.
Right. Double their pay, and you know what two times zero is.
Right.
And
Right.
since this is a science fiction group, I have this whole book of nerdy jokes for nerds that
Nice.
Laura gave me for a present. So let's see what we can find, shall we?
It's sometimes the dad jokes type thing or the nerdy jokes are the funniest.
Okay. How do aliens hitch a ride on the Enterprise?
I don't know how do aliens hitch a ride on the Enterprise.
They cling on.
Oh.
That's like you see, I saw a meme one time uh with the Klingons stuck to the Enterprise, and I think the joke was that, they didn't put enough fabric softener in their uniforms.
Hmm.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, how about this one? What did Spock find in the toilet?
Captain's log.
Very good.
Good. That's a good one.
And why did Kirk leave the bridge in a hurry?
He had to make a captain's log.
Captain's log supplemental.
Which kind of fits in with the commercial Shatner's been doing lately.
Shots everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. What is it for? Like brands?
Raisin bran. No,
Yeah,
raisin bran.
Raisin Bran. I'm like, do you have one more for us?
Uh, why did Picard sell his iPhone?
I,
Because Android has more data.
That's good.
I like that one. Oh my gosh. Well, hey, thanks everybody for tuning in. Um, we try to inform and entertain. Um, um, and again, if you're new to the group, or even if you're not, please come out, to an event. We'd love to see you at the picnic. Um, participate on our Facebook group. You can post jokes, you can uh post, pictures of an event that you want to. You can post jokes, whatever you'd like. Um,
Nerdy jokes.
nerdy jokes, exactly. Um, and our website. Do you want to give the address for our website, Joe?
USS Susquehannock at .org.
Yes.
And Susquehannock is spelled just the way it sounds.
Yes. Susqueha
Hannock.
and then OCK. Um, and Joe has worked very hard on our website. So
Yes, yeah, and thanks for doing that and hosting this.
yeah, absolutely. And um,
Well, I'm hoping to get a raise in pay for one of these.
We'll double your salary.
Well,
yeah,
this is Starfleet. We
Right,
don't
two
use
times
money
zero,
in this
exactly.
future.
Yeah.
This is Starfleet. We don't use money.
that right. You just get the satisfaction of a good job.
You don't get
All
Um,
right. Well,
paid.
use your replicator and make yourself some money. All right.
so thanks everybody, and we'll see you in the next podcast.
Yep.
See you later.
Take care.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
Live long and prosper.
that and more.
Mhm.